Hello everybody, welcome back. Dana, you're doing well. That's so awesome, man. Crazy good song. You'll find that at James Lucid's site here on YouTube, along with an absurd, incredible, I should say, amount of anti-nuclear music, just like it. You can call into these live shows at 709-589-4406. Here we go. I hope. Yep. The Doomsday plane. I got 7 of these to get through first. This was headlines after Fukushima. There was dissenting voices in the first couple of years. There wasn't a lot, but there's... Well, I guess there was a lot, I suppose, all things considered. Then it slowly dried up after about 4 years. It was pretty rare. There was still some dissenting voices besides us. And in the last 6 years, I guess, we've never heard any dissenting voices whatsoever. Radiation forecast withheld by the government. Releasing it would cause unnecessary panic. Oh, why do you got 100 sirens around a nuclear power plant? In case they release something, right? Well, then it should be safe to assume that a nuclear meltdown qualifies. The ministry decided such data would be unavailable because they might lose their positions of authority over the slaves and the communities. They gave the speedy radiation forecast to the U.S. military, and that they withheld the radiation forecast to prevent causing panic. And Speedy produced 5,500 models paid for by the Japanese in the first month. 5,500 models of radioactive fallout. That's what it was designed to do, right? Radiation forecasts in Japan kept secret. Because, mass panic, which is what you're supposed to do at a nuclear meltdown, because if you don't, then you end up stuck in a nuclear wasteland, right? It's appropriate. It's the only industry out there where panicking is appropriate. Government hid radiation simulation because it was very bad. Wide contamination, serious contamination over a wide area, the entire planet. France says Japan has lost control. The French should leave the country. Not just Fukushima, 20 kilometers zone, Fukushima prefecture, or 240 kilometers away, Tokyo, leave the country. That was a smart move. And finally, the forecast map of the radioactive cloud shows a threat to the United States west coast. It was so much worse than that, unfortunately. It was so bad they banned the food in 14 prefectures by 55 countries for a decade. Canada wasn't one of them. And Boris Johnson should be in jail for what he done. He removed 3 years before. How did I play it again? 3 years before he stepped down or was removed, he removed restrictions for babies, food, and cereals, which is what kids eat, from the nuclear wasteland. 2 years later, the same year he was removed from power, he removed all the restrictions for the rest of the population in the United Kingdom. If that's not the definition of a monster, what actually is, I wonder? Doomsday planes. Here we go. We got a poll, though, actually. Let me touch on that. Does the International Atomic Energy Agency, the nuclear industry, hate Earth, humans, and all species? Yeah, of course they do. Shocking amount to cost Doomsday plane to fly as one was seen circling a nuclear command base, causing officials to release a statement. Each E-4B jet cost $223 million to build, and it costs $160,000 per hour to operate. $160,000 an hour. It can refuel while airborne to permit 72 hours of straight flying. So $160,000 an hour times 72 hours is $11.5 million for 72 hours. $11.5 million. And they're not very efficient, those planes, right? They fly very high, and so they leave just horrific amount of particulates in the upper atmosphere. That blocks out the sun, of course, amongst many other things. Poisons the ocean we have in our sky. But $11.5 million of fuel. No wonder they're invading every country that got oil and killing everybody so they can get their hands on oil, so they can play with their toys. The fear-mongering is so much in this industry that they have to consume everything in order for them to survive. I don't know what the hell that is, because I put this together quite a few days back. That's okay, it happens. Man, there's not much more stupider looking than that picture right there. Here we go. Radioactive coolant leak reported at a Finnish nuclear power plant. I was in town again today to pick up a bunch of odds and ends. Shout out to James Luce that donated $350 on Thursday. I forgot to mention that, didn't I? I made that possible. Radioactive coolant leak reported at the Finnish nuclear disease factory. A leak. I don't need to remind anybody here regularly, but for those who are not, a leak is the cover word for massive release of reactor coolant. Now there's stuff that's in physical contact with the fuel rods. That stuff is absurdly radioactive. And then there's the water that cools down that whole system. That's 1 million gallons a minute on the outside. And so the reactor coolant is the extremely radioactive stuff. They successfully covered up this story by the looks of it. Wasn't this the French's design in France, or from France and Finland? It took them like 14, 16 years to get it running. It was 100 cubic meters of reactor coolant, which is 100,000 liters. And divided by 4 is 25,000 liters. I'm getting there for some reason. So it's 55 gallon barrels. 454 55 gallon barrels. So you're talking about an absurd amount of radiation, but per liter, you're talking about an absurd amount of radiation because it was in contact with the fuel. So it's the most radioactive water you can imagine. Was reported to have leaked, flooded from the reactor in connection with the filling of the reactor pool. The coolant flow into containment rooms close to the environment and into the floor drain system of the containment. So the dirty scumbag's got a drainage system, so it goes directly out to the rivers and oceans, whichever it happens to be alongside of. The containment room close to the environment. What the hell does that even mean? It's outside the reactor, period. The incident did not pose any risk to the personnel, the environment, or nuclear safety, said the group. What group? But it did, clearly. If it's in contact with the fuel rods that are splitting atoms, you're talking about the most radioactive water you can imagine. And you see the similar, but not as bad as this, in the fuel pools, still nightmarish. Let me see if I got that this time. On Friday, the 7th of March, a significant operating event occurred. Significant. During the maintenance work, when radioactive coolant, it's not a leak, it's a flood. When you're talking about almost 555-gallon drums, that's a flood. Into part of the rooms of the containment. Well, it's going to contaminate permanently anything it touches. So the massive flood occurred as a result of human error caused by a hatch of the reactor pool. The reactor pool itself is separate, not having been closed properly. There's no one who goes physically there and closes it. It's done mechanically, right? By a hatch of the reactor pool not having been closed properly. Maybe it is. Maybe that's the hatch where they bring in the exterior so-called maintenance crew over around 1,200 people because you don't want the cancer and heart problem, liver problem, etc., clusters to show up down the road. So they use external employees. A lot of them are transient workers. Like for the most dangerous job, they're using homeless and transient workers. Cleaning work was commenced quickly in the containment rooms, and personnel instructed about necessary changes in accessible areas. Necessary changes. So they were saying you can't go into this area, you can't go into that area anymore because it's permanently contaminated. How can you clean it up? Cleaning work was commenced quickly in the containment room. You had a massive release of highly radioactive material into a so-called containment room. You can't clean that up. You can't clean up a nuclear accident, particularly in that environment. So that was all flushed right out, and that's on the ocean, right? Yeah. So that was all flushed directly into the ocean, that particular site. The AUS SMC celebrates 20 years of fighting misinformation with evidence. Hey, that's what we do. That's what we do around here. It's not peer-reviewed. How come? Oh, I remember this story. The Australian science media. It's Australia. So you know it's going to be terrible. Just horrific scumbaggery. This work has not been scrutinized by independent experts. And what they got like, I don't know what it is, we'll see it coming up, or 5,000 experts or something. 5,000 bootlickers for the industry is what they're talking about. So I know I've seen the site before, but I couldn't remember it until I started. I put in Fukushima, I couldn't find a single thing. Nothing. Celebrating 2 decades, it's turned 20. Oh, that's right. It turned 20 that week. What was the date on this? I don't know if there was a date showed up on it. It was 4 or 5 days ago or something, this story. The Australia Science Media Centre. This is just another public relation firm for all the industries out there that the government is trying to considers assets. Celebrating 2 decades of helping journalists cover some of the biggest stories of the century, from the Fukushima nuclear accident. And when I put in Fukushima on their site, I got nothing. 0. So and has also recently led us to being granted charitable tax deductible gift recipient status, enabling to accept tax deductible donations and money from all the scumbags for the first time. Yay. With 2,000 registered journalists, which are the enemy of humanity, and 6,500 science experts, which are, they do have a few good people there, but that's meant the yin and the yang, so to speak, right? To lull you into that complacency. When science hits the headlines, like my criteria for a broadcasting co-host, a color commentator, so to speak, is pretty high. It's pretty high. You got to get it right. You can't make any mistakes, because then I got to correct you. And so then I looks like the bad guy, right? Because when I was correcting them, and it's very difficult for somebody to become credible in that environment, so to speak. Is there to connect the people behind the news with independent and credible experts from around the country. We'll show you some of that. And they got the most revolting parasites that they did roll out. I did find, that's right, I did find stories about Fukushima, but I didn't find it in the search engine for some reason. It's in collaboration between the Australian science, so they had to spend 20 years building up a massive resource before they can get the status to become a permanent scumbag. And the Science Media Centre of New Zealand, and was developed through substantial funding from the Australian government. So you know that they're the bootlickers of the bootlickers. So they had additional support provided by Squids, the Meyer Foundation, and the Australian Science Media Centre. Experts' reaction. Treated Fukushima wastewater. Expert reaction, bold letters, right? Set to be released Thursday. Remember that story? And we covered Tony Hooker. We covered Nigel Marks. These are just disgusting maggots of the industry. These are the banana peddlers, the potato chip peddlers. I would like to reiterate that the release of tritium, so they're only acknowledging tritium. The worst humans imaginable are the ones that done that, because they're the experts and they know better. It's undertaken worldwide with no evidence of environmental or human health implications. There's an absurd amount of evidence. Everything is tritiated now on top of that worldwide, tritium-3H. And they don't even call it tritium-3H, because when you look it up, you'll see it's man-made, right? I welcome the news about the impending release and support Japan's decision to commence disposal and believe they have a robust radiation management plan that has been approved my goodness, my apologies. Let me see. So they're only acknowledging tritium. This goes back to the older story in the book, by the way. Right, like the airborne radiation in Tokyo. This was from incineration in the incinerators. Was almost 20 microsieverts per hour in the Tokyo air, and they were 200 times what they considered normal levels pre-Fukushima meltdowns. The IAEA and the Japanese Non-Regulatory Commission. These are the least credible organizations. The International Atomic Energy Agency. I posted a video up in my video section a couple of days ago, or yesterday, I think it was, of a 2-minute video that they snatched out of my anniversary video. So I compared the videos, found a spot where 2 minutes was missing, and it was all about the International Atomic Energy Agency, as well as other radiation protection agencies worldwide. No, see, United Nations has all kinds. There's IAEA, UNSCLEAR, ERPA, the IPRC, and they all are quoted, typically, but they're all the same organization with the same players. They have the exact same players. Associated Professor Nigel Marks. He's a professor in physics astronomy. So why are we talking to him? You can't find a nuclear scientist in Australia. In a couple of days, Japan will start releasing the treated, which is none of this was true, by the way. They never stopped releasing it into the ocean directly. There is no filtration system. How are you going to filter multiple sieverts per liter? How does that actually work? You can't do it because you can never get near the filter again. The main problem with the release is that it sounds bad, but it actually isn't. What are we asking an astronomer stuff like this for? Similar releases have occurred around the world for 6 days and nothing bad has ever happened. Again, the exact same narrative as Tony. The radioactivity in the Fukushima water is almost entirely tritium and then a type of hydrogen being water. For scale, the Pacific contains 8,400 grams of pure tritium. The numbers was around 100 kilograms pre-nuclear industry. And Sellafield and La Hague in the first decade of operation almost quadrupled, but tripled the natural tritium from the environment, from the solar system interaction, right? It's completely different than the tritium-3H from a nuclear event. But why are we talking about tritium? Japan will release 0.06 grams of tritium every year. 0.06 grams. Like, the lie that they're telling you is so egregious. It's so outrageous. It's so disgusting and dishonest. And the universities, if they were even remotely honest, could easily justify taking their degree away, and governments could prosecute them for what they've done. So this was on the 15th of March, day 4. Because March 11th is when it happened, right? There's 4 reactors, and there was 8 fuel pools at the top of each of the buildings. That's 36 reactor cores. That's all gone. The plume actually covered the entire planet. This was 1 million and 10 million atoms, or 1 million and 10 million times pre-Fukushima levels of cesium-137 per cubic meter of air, and cesium-137 pulses energy 600 feet every second. This was a plume covering the entire planet in 23 days. This is the French government. And then think about this here. These are some of the medias, and it looks a bit grainy because it's the video version, right? This is just 4 of the many media pretending they were 150 feet above reactor 4 in the middle of nowhere in an invisible fuel pool. Well, actually, let's just play it. It's only a minute long.
Where I'm standing is on top of what used to be reactor building number 4. The whole of this building was blown apart by a huge explosion.
We are here inside Reactor 4 at the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant that was severely crippled during the earthquake and tsunami of 2011.
Of the decommissioning work taking place here in Reactor 4.
At the end of our tour, we were checked for radiation exposure. In 4 hours, I received the equivalent of less than a chest x-ray.
1,500 highly radioactive fuel rods inside this pool. They've got to move them outside of this reactor.
It's sedition, what they're doing, right? It's terrifying how the Pacific ecosystem has collapsed since Fukushima. Plutonium and uranium suspected of spreading through the food chain. And the biggest byproduct of the radiated fuel rod is the curium isotopes. And curium needs lead sheeting 20 times thicker. A lifetime worth of seafood cut a few kilometers from the ocean outlet has the tritium radiation equivalent of a bite of a banana. It's almost worth my time now to get on an airplane, fly to Australia, and go down and pull the little scrap of hair he got left in his head right off his head. A lifetime's worth of the seafood. So if you ate seafood for the rest of your life right by a nuclear meltdown, you get the equivalent of a bite of a banana. Like, this is supposed to be a nuclear expert in astronomy, but he's not a nuclear expert. Pretty dishonest. It's hard to imagine that a jury would convict you if you were to walk up and kick him in the nuts or something. Does someone like that actually have nuts, I wonder? And then, of course, Tony Hooker, the International Atomic Energy Agency. Anyway, let me guess the wrong one there. The bite of a banana. He should be forced to eat 1 million bananas until he dies. Ocean release is the only practical option at Fukushima. What are you talking about? I'll explain that to you, actually, because it's a little bit complicated if you're not familiar with the subject. We'll get to it in a moment here. Declared conflict of interest? None. He previously worked for the Australian Nuclear Science and Technology and Los Alamos National Laboratory. The least trustworthy person imaginable. And Nigel previously worked for the Australian Nuclear Science Organisation and received funding from the Australian Research Council, ANSTO, and the Los Alamos National Laboratory in Radioactive Waste Storage. Tony Irwin is an honorary associate professor. In other words, they gave him those accolades so that it's like so you can have some kind of street creds with people who don't know any better. He's the technical director of Small Modular Reactor Nuclear Technology Limited. Like, you don't have any. There is no small modular reactors. How can you be the technical director of something that doesn't even exist? And there's 100 companies now in the last number of years shot up, and they all got different designs. None of them is going to crack it. They've been at it for 80 years. And chair of engineers, Australia Sydney Division Nuclear Engineering Panel. So he's like literally the worst guy imaginable because they don't have small modular reactors. He's a technical director of this stuff that doesn't exist. They don't even have a license, let a company or design. And then the insult to the insult, they invoked the World Health Organization. The discharge limit for release, which is United Nations, for the release of radioactive water at Fukushima is 1/7 of the World Health Organization. And declared conflicts of interest. He's the technical director of the Small Modular Reactor Nuclear Technology, an independent company that advises on the sitting development operation, a safe, is there such a thing as safe? Let me see if I can fix the Geiger counter up there a little bit. I can't get up and physically adjust it here right now, but that's close enough, right? All right, so shit, I don't know where to start. I know where to start, but like they told so many lies. So okay, let me get on track here. So their narrative is they have 1,000 tanks, and that's where all the water went. Right? There was no water made it into the ocean. They all got stored in 1,000 tanks. 1,000 tanks. That's a lot of tanks, ain't it? I know. Oh, I hear you. And I need to give you a picture, though, so just bear with me. Bags. Oh, there it is. Here we go. I need a wide shot of this site, actually. This is one part of the site. It's a pretty big part of the site, actually. We counted the tanks. We've only counted, and we were being generous, 750 tanks. And you see those blue tanks? Let me point that out to you. We counted 750 tanks because we have about 1,000 pictures or something. And so if you include those tanks there, those small tanks, not just the big tanks, but if you include the small tanks, and you can see a bunch back there, and we have different pictures from different angles. The most we found was 650. All right. There we go. It's flowing straight into the ocean. So if we counted 750 tanks. And because we've gathered up a lot of documentation over here, I can make it fairly easy for you. 2013, August 28, Mary Yamaguchi. They had 1,000 tanks in the first 3 years. 1,000 tanks. So they had 1,000 tanks in the first year. And by the way, a single reactor can fill up all the tanks 6 times a day at 4,500 tons, 1 million gallons a minute. That's what the reactor needs to keep cool. It's 1 million gallons a minute. So when it runs away, it actually needs a lot more water. So it can fill up 1,000 tanks 6 times every day. All right, so this is the BBC in 2013. That's the same year as they allegedly had 1,000 tanks. And in 2025, they have 1,000 tanks. All right. So this is a clip of the BBC, Rupert Winfield Hayes, and it's also TEPCO. They're going to tell you they have no control over the water whatsoever. And the REVA system, the ELP system, the Ceres system, water filtration systems, hasn't even been built at this stage. 2013, and I'll show you that. They started to build it. Let me play this first. So they're going to tell you all the tanks were full in 2013.
Fukushima plant sits smack in the middle of an underground aquifer. Deep beneath the ground, the site is rapidly being overwhelmed by water. Beneath the surface, water flows downhill and into the basement of the damaged reactor buildings. There it is contaminated with high levels of radiation. To stop the groundwater flowing on into the nearby ocean, engineers are building an underground barrier. But that is causing the groundwater level to rapidly rise. It's now so high the water will soon reach the surface. Then it will start flowing overground into the sea. This week, the company that owns Fukushima, TEPCO, made this disturbing admission.
We understand that this water discharge is beyond our control, and we do not think the current situation is good.
Outside experts say it's now clear TEPCO is incapable of handling the cleanup at Fukushima. It's time for the Japanese government to step in. The situation is already beyond what TEPCO can handle, he says. If it were possible to take proper measures, they would have done it already. It's not as if TEPCO is refusing to do what they can. They're doing everything they can, but there are no perfect solutions. Even if the government does step in, it's not clear what it can do. The only other solution is to pump out the contaminated groundwater and put it in storage tanks. But after just 2 years, the site is already jammed with more than 1,000 giant tanks. Most of them are already full up. At least 400 tonnes of new water pours into the site every day, and it's going to continue for years and years. Fukushima's water crisis has only just begun. Rupert Wingfield-Hayes, BBC News in Tokyo.
So tanks don't matter because they were all full allegedly in 2013 from an aquifer underneath the reactors. There is zilch possibility that they took that water and put it in a tank. And second, and I'll explain that in a second. So in 2013, these images were released to the public. That's the ALPS decontamination system right there. So they had allegedly all the tanks were full. They still haven't got a filtration system. Not that that can work. In 2014, almost 2015, they were hoping to have the ALPS system operational sometime 2015 or something. So they built all the tanks allegedly in 2013. That was the cover story. You can't put this stuff you pour water over the reactors. You're talking massive volume. And then you have wells on this site. You're pumping the water, the radioactive water up, and you're allegedly putting it in tanks. But what you're talking about is water with fuel particulates in it that are splitting atoms. And so if you put that in the tank, when it settles on the bottom after a few days, neutrons, betas, alphas, gammas, you're going to have a criticality and burn a hole through the tank. And we've seen it at Hanford. We've seen it at Moyac, for instance. You can't do that stuff, see? Not only that, the numbers that they acknowledge, let me just go through this. The numbers that they're acknowledging, 1,000 tanks, for instance, they were saying each liter was 2.2 sieverts, and that was just beta. So if you exclude the fact that you can't have just beta, you still have 1.4 million sieverts. I'm just looking for that documentation for you. Yeah, I know it's worse, so. This stuff is where the food is for some reason. I gotta move it. Copy it somewhere else too, in case I get a brain freeze and can't find it. To 2.2 sieverts of beta from a single liter of leaked water. 3 sieverts is a lethal dose. 4 sieverts is a lethal dose, for instance. So 2 liters, if you stand there for a few minutes, that's a lethal dose. If you have 5 gallons of it, and you put it in the wall of a subway station or an airport, and everybody walks past it, will die that day. So if you put this stuff in a tank, by the way, because you can't have just beta, it's going to be gammas, alphas, and neutrons, right? You're looking at 10 sieverts anyway per liter. 3 sieverts is a lethal dose just being in proximity. You don't have to drink it or anything like that. So, March 10, 2014, Mari Yamaguchi, Associated Press, they allegedly had 1,200 tanks. Australia reported on 2017 that they had 900 large and densely packed tanks. And I showed you the pictures. These were not large and densely packed at all in the context of what they're saying. There was 1/3 of them were small tanks, very small tanks. And look at this guy here. And try walking with both of your heels on the ground. Try walking like that. Just stand up and get that pose. And you can have the zombie pose with your arm hanging down. This is most likely green screen. I don't know why, but it's most likely green screen. By the way, those tanks would have to be 6 feet thick lid. Minimum, in the bottom and the top, to shield you. Now, once you put this stuff, 2.2 sieverts per liter, for instance, in the tank is so radioactive, even if the water drains out, you can never get near the tank the interior of the tank gets lethal doses forever. And so then the question is, how can they be dismantling tanks? We got pictures of it recently, where they're allegedly dismantling tanks, and they're inside the tanks, because the tanks were empty, see? Japan will have to dump the radioactive water into the Pacific Ocean 2019. And on that line right there at the beginning over there is 1,000 tanks, 2019. 2021, 1,000 tanks. 2024, Mari Yamaguchi, 2013, 2024. Blah, blah, blah. This line right there, you see capacity. That same line up there, 1,000 tanks. So you got 1,000 tanks in 2013, 1,000 tanks in 2024. And we know now there's 1,000 tanks in 2025. You had no filtration system. They were only building it in 2014. Even if you then where did all the tanks were full in 2013? I played those clips for me for the BBC. Rupert Winfield Hayes. So where did the next 2 years of water go to? If any, even a spigot, a single sentence of what they've ever said is true, where did the 2 years of coolant water go? Now the numbers of coolant was 140 tons a day. Do you know what your garden hose puts out every day? Your 3 8-inch garden hose? It puts out at 30 pounds per square inch, 130 tons a day. So if you took a garden hose and split it 4 ways, and each one of those were spraying on a nuclear meltdown, it's equivalent to having someone stood up pissing on a nuclear meltdown. That's how much water we're talking about. Water above 1 sievert per hour. There's a ton of documentation of how radioactive water. 1,000 years from now, the contaminated water from Fukushima may be still entering the ocean. But the reality of it was that was the cover story, right? The tanks and the water filtration, the ELP system. I can walk you through all that. I got entire videos and presentations, documentation of it. So reactor 3 is completely gone. It blew up. It blew up and caught fire. Caught fire, blew up. Not necessarily in that order. And reactor 4, it blew up and caught fire and blew up. So there was 16 reactor cores at the top of both of those buildings that don't even exist, period. So the idea was to cover up with these kooky stories. Japan assures the Marshall Islands of transparency on Fukushima wastewater discharge. Oh yeah, we wouldn't lie to you, says the Japanese. And the Marshall Islands, of course, you know what happened to them. Their Castle Bravo was out there equal to 1,000 Nagasaki's. Prime Minister, the current idiot in Japan, Ishiba, explained, because they go through a lot of prime ministers in their country. They're not as bad as France, but they're pretty getting there. Explained that the safety of the discharge is ensured and that Japan's plans to support monitoring capacities building through the International Atomic Energy Agency, the least trustworthy organization in human history is the IAEA. They're literally disgusting goblins. He also mentioned the Japanese will continue to handle the matter with transparency. Like, what are you talking about? There's no transparency with Japan. Based on scientific evidence to enhance the confidence in its safety. And so the Marshallese, one of the worst victims of the nuclear industry, period, the Japanese are like, oh, no, nothing got out. Nothing got out. This is the Stumper reactor 3, the plutonium mixed oxide reactor. And that's the explosion of it over there. Nothing got out of these reactors. Well, that's quite reassuring. Because you know what? It sure looks like a lot got out. It looks like everything got out. Because the fuel pools of reactor cores are at the top of the buildings, and there is no top to the building. I played that video for you earlier where they're pretending they're on top of the building. So this is a disgusting industry. This is an industry that has now compromised the future of everybody and every species. they're compromised. See? She's compromised. Like, all she needs to do is have some big placards of stuff like this. And she's got the news conference. She hangs out and she says, really, nothing got out of these buildings? And the whole world will go, what the hell is going on here? What is that? There's nothing left of them buildings. And so all the media worldwide is cooperating. You wouldn't believe how many medias worldwide pretended they're on top of Reactor 4. How in the name of goodness are we going to have a future with these creatures? How? Pacific Island Forum Secretary General Baron Waga said in 2023 the region leaders are committed to holding Japan accountable should anything go wrong. Like, what are you talking about? Everything has gone wrong. The reactors are gone, you shit for brains. You're lucky I don't have a big budget. I fly down to the Marshall Islands right now, and I make sure everybody down there knew what you've done, you piece of shit. I pass out big placards of this all throughout the community, say, why is your leaders telling you nothing got out of these buildings? It's pretty revolting when you see it. And look, he's got her boat over her hands. Look at this. He's hanging on the boat over her hands. I got a big suitcase of money for you. Don't forget to kick back to me. Oh, so the two leaders are also discussed other bilateral issues, including the reconstruction of the International Airport Terminal in the Marshall Islands, to contribute to the Pacific Resilient Facilities of the Pacific Island Forum, and support for the development of a water supply system for the Marshall Islands to strengthen its net. That's the payoff. All she got to do is sell out everybody's health and the future of humanity, and they get a couple of trinkets like that. And they're the most vulnerable people because they've had so much done to them, right? So you got to be exceptionally evil, unbelievably evil, and monstrously evil to do what they're doing. $50 years ago, they would have got assassinated right away, right? Some patriots would have took them out immediately. Fukushima town looks outside to rebuild and bolster population. Now we're supposed to just let the industry poison us whatever they feel like it. Yeah, we're going to contaminate the entire planet, but we'll just get the journalists to pretend they're at the top of the building, and then all the media is going to tell that lie, and you can't do nothing about it, so shut up. What they done to me, like the stuff they say to me, pretending they're on a building that don't exist, for instance, and the stuff they done to me over the years to try to silence me, there's no end to it, eh? Fukushima town looks outside to rebuild and bolster the population. Looks outside. The local population doesn't want to come back. The municipal housing complex in FUTABA, Fukushima Prefecture. The municipal housing. So the government built new buildings in a nuclear wasteland where if you get on your roof, you can see the meltdown reactors. If not just from your garden. 85% of that community, by the way, is a no-go zone. It's a nuclear wasteland. So you can't go there because it's a nuclear wasteland. They call it a no-go zone because that's what cowards do, right? It's a nuclear wasteland. FUTABA, which is joined on to the nuclear disease factory itself, to the north of the plant, right? It's two kilometers. At the far end of town, you're 2 kilometers away from the nuclear meltdowns. 85% of it is a nuclear wasteland. It was abandoned, basically still abandoned. 2.5 years after evacuation orders were lifted in parts, in 2.5 years after 36 reactor cores meltdown. It's like if I built a house in Chernobyl, 2 kilometers away from Chernobyl, and then I had a realtor selling the property. It's beautiful looking property. And he puts you in a vehicle and he's going to drive you out there because you got to have clearance to get into the area. So you go out and you drive in there and you go through the checkpoints and you got to wear this, you got to wear that and everything else. And we get to the house and We open the door up and you got to rush in right away because you're not allowed to hang out in the garden. And now you're inside the house, and this is the house that I'm trying to sell you. What's going to be going through your head? Like, honey, hit him over the head so we can get out of here and maybe we can survive. A FUTABA. The population of FUTABA remains at around 180 or 3% of the levels. Now, most of these are the transient workers, the homeless and the destitute and the victims of society. Right? They have, you remember how we started the story off with municipal housing? That's for the workers at Fukushima, see? There is a few elderly people that don't know any better and or unfortunately were tricked into going back into the nuclear wasteland. And usually they're very sick too, very feeble people. The triple meltdown at the plant. The triple nuclear meltdown at the nuclear power plant. How about at least give it that dignity anyway to call it what it is. After school, there's few places in the FUTABA neighborhood for children to play. Not that there's very many children there. Recently, a group, but there is, they should be charged with child abuse right away. Children should be seized and given to family members somewhere else. A group of 11 parents living in a municipal housing petitioned the town assembly for playground equipment. So clearly, these should be charged with child abuse. You're within 2 kilometers of ongoing nuclear meltdown, surrounded by a nuclear wasteland. Only 15% of your town is you're allowed to get in your car and drive there. There's no shops or nothing there. You're not allowed to play in your garden. It's the strangest. It really is. Like, I've covered a lot of strange stories, but the Fukushima version is just absurd. And they're so insane, right? They're actually insane, these people in the industry. The petition town assembly for playground equipment. Yamami, 39-year-old, a town assembly member who moved from Tokyo and married a woman, is raising 3 children in the nuclear wasteland. So he's a town assembly member who's raising 3 children in a nuclear wasteland. Does that mean he has the moral high ground or something? His children should be taken away and he should be put in jail, and his wife, and the children should be put with other family members that are not in a nuclear wasteland. The most common reason for moving to Fukushima was to support local reconstruction of the nuclear wasteland, not disaster hit area, but the nuclear wasteland. Have some morals, man. Cited by 6 households. 5 households relocated for work, while 4 were attracted by the local nature. Their version of a household could be a great big accommodations where they get all the homeless to. The town lacks a supermarket. Well, it lacks everything. Job opportunities are also limited within the FUTABA. There is no jobs in FUTABA unless you're picking up 1-ton bags of radioactive fallout. When asked about the challenge of living in FUTABA, 14 households cited lack of shopping. 11 said a scarcity of job opportunities. 10 expressed the need for more medical welfare services. So clearly, we're talking about a very vulnerable portion of society is the people that moved back into the nuclear wasteland. These are clearly not highly educated, articulated, wealthy people. They need welfare, medical. 9 expressed a desire for the complete lifting of evacuation orders across the town. So they're completely in denial that a nuclear meltdown has any adverse side effects. Because the public relations, you can imagine being pummeled constantly by the nuclear bullies if you lived there, right? Oh, you got radiophobia. This is where they got the museum to, right? In the next town, Nami. Is it Nami? Can you remember for some reason? Fukushima Prefecture offers a $13,000 subsidy to families from outside the prefecture who live in a nuclear wasteland for more than 5 years. That's disgusting. That is just disgusting. A couple of $1,000s a year to poison you and your loved ones and your children. Imagine how evil you are to cook up that whole narrative. The respondents include 8 males, 11 females, 1 person who did not specify. That was a reporter, most likely, that is transient to that place. Food for thought, only 1 couple returned after evacuation orders. That's 2023, the same town. So in 2023, there was only 1 couple, elderly, very, very elderly couple, who were manipulated into going back to the nuclear wasteland. And can you imagine how complacent they got to be? It's just absurd, eh? Well, honey, nobody lives here. Maybe we should... don't be silly. They got radiophobia. The nice scientist told me so. Soil removed during Fukushima decontamination. Dispel concerns. This was 2025, March 24th, this year, last month. 7 days ago. Dispel concerns and push for reuse of the soil. There's 30 million one-ton bags. You can put a 1-ton bag of radioactive soil on a 1-ton pickup truck. And bumper to bumper, 30 million of that would be 5 rows of traffic right around the entire planet. If you stack the bags on top of each other, it's enough to go to the space station and back 6 times or something. What'd you pick it up for if you're going to try to use it? How can you use it? Do you think radiation turns to fairy dust or something? Fukushima Prefecture has no hope of recovery unless a path is open for the disposal of the removed soil removed during decontamination work, which has been left in large quantities near Tokyo Electric Power Company's holding. It wasn't left there, it was brought there. There was 150,000 sites of 1-ton bags. I've just... I just don't understand what planet these people are coming from. I don't understand why they hate everybody so much for a paycheck. I can't quite wrap my mind around it. Sorry, just give me a second here. Yeah, right there. Just let me show you a couple of pictures of the 1-ton bags so you can kind of wrap your mind around what I mean. And this picture here, for instance, there are 1-ton bags over there. They're harvesting rice for sale. This is for the mainstream media in Japan, by the way. Chastising anybody that criticizes the farmers. The whole story is insane. That's the crazy part about this is they don't need to be this cruel, right? They don't need to be this hateful. They don't need to be this murderous. This is murder what they're doing by moving people back into the nuclear wasteland. And growing food in the nuclear wasteland, what do you call that if that's not murder? So Fukushima, you can look up the story 2019. There was 2016 was 150,000 sites. In 2019, there was 105,000 sites. And so they look like this. 30 million 1-ton bags. It's hard to wrap your mind around that volume, actually. There's one piece missing from that. Here. So playing past the parcel with Fukushima 2016. That was year 5. There was 30 million tons of radioactive waste will eventually be moved to yet another third level interim storage facility near that's what they were talking about there. When they say it was stacked there, it's only because it was moved there over 14 million one-ton bags. But they're talking about 30 million one-ton bags. They didn't stop picking up one-ton bags in year 5 in 2016. They're still picking them up today. They just stopped counting them. 30 million one-ton bags. Since nuclear accident, this is just one of the reactors, not counting the fuel pool at the top of the buildings, is worse than all nuclear meltdowns we know about combined. Because they were such large reactors, they were pure uranium, pure plutonium. And remember, the reason they picked up 30 million one-ton bags is because radioactive atoms, and you put 200 million atoms on the head of a needle and you can't see it, but each atom, and it was 100,000 minimum per kilogram, and many of it was 20 million atoms per kilogram of stuff they were picking up in the 30 million one-ton bags, is just, but a single atom is 2 billion times more toxic than industrial poison. So it doesn't take, not only that, it pulses energy almost at the speed of light every second. And so if you're within 600 feet of cesium, it's belting and destroying your chromosomes, your DNA, your cells, etc., etc. Since the nuclear accident at the plant released radioactive substances, the buildings were completely nearby. Like the nearby covered the whole planet. In the United States and Washington, the xenon, there was many different isotopes recorded. The xenon-133 was at 450,000 times above detection levels, persisted for weeks, and the significance of that is xenon has a very short half-life. But it decays to stuff that lasts for decades and hundreds of years. And then, because there's 10 decays, each decay could decay to an isotope that could last, anthropogenic man-made isotopes, that nothing on the planet has immune trigger to defend against. It could decay to them, and some of them might not go away for 1 billion years. And when you look at natural stuff that doesn't decay for 1 billion years, you write it off as innocuous and harmless and benign. But when it's man-made, it retains the energy. So the longevity of an anthropogenic man-made isotope is significant because it never loses its energy. It's not like natural stuff. You can't conflate them together. You can't compare them together. So 450,000 times above detection levels, that wouldn't, if you got a plume of xenon, you got a plume of uranium, you got a plume of plutonium, you got a plume, in that same plume rather, right? So this was the model of 1 million to 10 million times background level pre-Fukushima's cesium-137 by the French government. And this model here is only based on 20 days right there of radioactive fallout. But it's based on numbers, it's based on actual inventories. But a fraction of the actual inventories that were lost. So it didn't include the fuel pools or the reactor cores from these two buildings. There was 4 of these buildings that lost their inventories. Each building had 9 reactors, at least 8 in the fuel pools. So 1 million, 10 million times normal after Fukushima, that's what that model is. And that cesium, so you could talk about 30 million atoms of cesium-137 per cubic meter of air, covering the entire planet according to the French government. These are absurd numbers. And cesium-137 is like code word for curium. The biggest byproduct of the radiated fuel rod is curium isotopes. Decontamination work was carried out to remove the substance from residential areas, but it wasn't, was it? The whole planet was buried in it. It blanketed the entire planet. And that's why you don't clean bugs off your windshields anymore, for starters. And that's why the food chain is broken. That's why we're seeing an extinction event. And that's why you see polls where I ask a simple question. Does the International Atomic Energy Agency, the nuclear industry, hate Earth, hate humans, and hate all species? Well, clearly that's what's going on. They hate us. They despise. They absolutely, unequivocally despise an agricultural land in a nuclear wasteland. And we got pictures of that, right? Oh, I've done it. And agricultural land. Yeah, the food was banned in 14 prefectures by 55 countries for a decade because they're growing food in a nuclear wasteland. Canada wasn't one of them. Canada's not really a country, right? The level of radiation is low in 3/4 of about 40 million cubic meters of soil, and thus is considered usable in road embankments for land development, among other purposes. Now, this was never true anywhere on the planet pre-Fukushima. They might have done it, but it wasn't done, like legally, illegally, because no one's paying attention, so they'll change the rules. 14 million cubic meters of soil. Well, what happened to the other 16 million cubic meter of soils? And what they say is low is actually 5 million atoms per square meter. As of this month, the soil had been in storage for 10 years, but there's still no prospect of it being disposed of. So, like, they're saying they can't move on unless they deal with the soil. That's what's stopping people from moving back to the nuclear wasteland. Because when you're driving past 100,000, imagine 5 years ago, you're driving past 150,000 sites of 1-ton bags to go somewhere. And if you don't get it then, it's because you're mentally ill. However, even if a person was to work on top of the soil, he would receive the annual radiation dose of less than a millisievert. It's simply not true. Like, first off, the top bags are considered deep soils. And the side bags are considered deep soil that's not contaminated to shield people driving down the road. That's the idea of the extra layers of bags. And so this is below the amount of radiation a person receives in daily life or when having a CAT scan. Now, a CAT scan, you're turning on a proton beam and you're turning it off, basically. It's a beam of energy. Radiation, the 1-ton bags are full of physical atoms. And when they're in your body responds to it by attacking it with white blood cells for the rest of your life. And not only that, it's 1 trillion times bigger dose when it's in your body, because it's pulsing energy at the speed of light every second. And it's wrecking all your chromosomes, your DNA, your red blood cells, and everything else. Your body tries to repair that every second and attack the source. And when you got a lot of it, and if you're in the nuclear, anywhere in Japan, you got a lot of it. I mean, there's 865,000 extra cancers in the first year, and cancer is typically latent. It shows up later, right? You can't conflate it with a CAT scan. So that journalist should lose their degree for even suggesting that. But no other prefecture is willing to accept the nuclear waste. The mayor of FUTABA, which doesn't live in FUTABA, has announced the town is considering, he is, reusing the radioactive waste for land development in the town joined onto a nuclear meltdown, among other purposes. Like, this is the shit for brains. The people of the town have every right to get rid of that guy. They don't, you shouldn't be in that town. 85% of the town is off limit because it's a nuclear wasteland. You can't clean it up. The reactors are still melting down. My heart's broken all the time for these victims that are there. Shouldn't other local governments across the country cooperate and reuse the soil? Why not dig a deep geological repository and drive it all down there? You drove it all someplace, you drove it all to another place, you repackaged it every 2 or 3 years allegedly, you drove it to another place, now you drove it to Fukushima FUTABA. Can't you just dig a big hole in a nice safe spot and put all your bags down there and let them decay naturally over 1 million years? Why does it have to be reused? You disgusting, revolting, horrific cowards. You're just cowards. Leaving the problem solely to those near the Fukushima plant. Now you reap what you sow, right? Decontamination work is being carried out in areas where evacuation orders were issued following the nuclear accident. Expanding the range of where the people can live. Think of that statement. oh, we're going to go and pick up some 1-ton bags, so now you can move in there. Then we're going to take the 1-ton bags and make your gardens and your farmlands and your roads. Why are you going to pick it up if it's harmless? Since few victims are stupid enough to return to the areas, these people are insane. To revitalize the nuclear wasteland, which is words that we should never be uttering, alongside of making steady progress on decommissioning the nuclear reactors, there must also be strong efforts across ministries and agencies to secure locations that will accept the soil through a panel of all cabinet ministers established at the end of last year to discuss the matter. So they want the cabinet members to supersede the sovereignty and the rights and the health of everybody that is going to be stuck with this stuff. You got a bunch of hand-picked, high-level, so-called useful idiots for the military-industrial complex and the nuclear industry, and what they say go. If that's not the most dangerous form of a society, that's so-called, what is? Soil removed during Fukushima decontamination. Yeah. So you're going to remove the soil, move people into the nuclear wasteland. It's always going to be a nuclear wasteland. The reactors are still melting down on top of that. You can only clean up 3%, not even clean it up, but you can only pick up the topsoil in 3% of the area, which is the communities and the farmlands. It's the most insidious thing conceivable. And what they do is they'll find people that are complacent and moved into the nuclear wasteland because they don't appreciate what nuclear is. And then they'll tell their story as if they have some moral compass or moral high ground. The healing power of flowers. Flowers can't heal you in a nuclear wasteland, okay? I'm sure you're a lovely person, but out telling people that it's safe to go back to a nuclear wasteland is not acceptable. And we see so many examples of that. The vultures, journalists, predators, journalists, seek out these people and then exploit them to manipulate others into letting down their guards and moving back into a nuclear wasteland. Just south of the crippled, no, these are not crippled, these are nuclear meltdowns. They'd be crippled if I can fucking catch them. It's just absurd, isn't it? Look at these buildings. They blew up. There's nothing left of them. And I mean nothing left of it. I'd never tolerate any of these people for a second. You'd be surprised how quick a coward can run if you see me coming. Yeah, one thing about the nuclear industry, they got enough cowards to go around, don't they? Just bear with me. Is that it? So, there was a blurb about these 1-ton bags in FUTABA that might be useful for you. Hang on here. There we go. This was the International Atomic Energy Agency's public trust is the key to projects using radioactive soil. Public trust. So, manipulation, deceit, and dishonesty. Propaganda is the key to reusing it. By the way, the International Atomic Energy Agency, this is their words, not mine, is not a regulator. They don't have any authority or any sovereignty in any country, and therefore they're not in the position to judge or approve Japan's soil recycling project. So shut your fucking mouth then. You worthless, disgusting parasites. noting that the group's task is to make sure Japan's plan is in line with their safety standards, International Atomic Energy Agency standards, the United Nations, and disposal of radioactive waste, which is reusing it. Why would you even give them 2 seconds of your time? They can't hold anybody accountable. They can't persuade anybody. They're not regulators. They don't have the authority to hold or demand or anything like that. Right? They're a military-industrial complex that has been weaponized against humanity for way too long. We need to break that cycle. It's not a triple meltdown. You can't call it a triple meltdown. How can you say that reactor 4 is not melted down? How can you say that? Because there was 8 reactor cores, each of them 100 times the size of Chernobyl because they're pure uranium, pure plutonium, were at the top of the buildings. And you can see what happened to reactor 3. It ejected the reactor core and the fuel pool right out of the building. That's reactor 3. March the 14th, day 3. The triple meltdown. They should be thrown into the meltdown. These orders have now mostly been lifted. But I mean, 85% of the community is off limit. How can you move anybody back into the 15%? And the 15% that is open is right around the train station. So you can run the homeless and the destitute and the victims of society and immigrants who don't speak the language past right straight into the nuclear meltdown. But as people return, they're sad to find the town's colorful bushes were removed during decontamination work. Like if you go to a place where there's so-called decontamination work from a nuclear meltdown, you don't hang around. You don't try to convince people to come back. If you're stupid enough to stay there, then you should be arrested and to protect yourself. You're committing suicide. One young man has made it his missions to revive. One young man who doesn't know anything about nuclear, believes the disgusting, revolting, parasitic narratives, has made it his mission to revive the symbolic blossoms in Tomoka nuclear wasteland and bring back the joy of spring. You're in a nuclear wasteland, shit for brains. His family ran a garden in that area, Fukushima Prefecture, for generation. They cultivated that particular plant for 300 years, and he's ensuring the tradition continues. So let's trick everybody to go into the nuclear wasteland and lose their health. So the media seizes upon people like that who don't know any better. I mean, yes, very pretty, but pretty doesn't cut it when it comes to nuclear wasteland, stupid. Even a few flowers can help people heal. No, they can't. It's nuclear. You're in a nuclear wasteland, for goodness sakes. I want flowers to impact people in a positive way. Well, that's the opposite, though. Convincing people to go back to a nuclear wasteland, even just to get pictures, is criminal in every sense of the word. Where are you going to draw a line? Are you just because someone's stupid enough to go into a nuclear wasteland, just because a journalist is evil enough to manipulate the story to convince others to do the same thing, the journalist should get the death penalty for doing what he's doing. He's making cocktails using his radioactive plants, in addition to cherry blossoms in a nuclear wasteland. That's some of them doing their work there. That's their product. Radioactive death machines. Oh yeah, come on back to the nuclear wasteland. Yeah, we can't see it or smell it or hear it or feel it or taste it, perceive it. So therefore it can't hurt you, right? The industry is counting on a woman who survived Hiroshima and Nagasaki atomic bombing breaks her silence. She'd been breaking her silence. Like, they didn't get any health care for 74 years. Because the Japs said that the nuclear industry, in particular in Japan, said that nobody got a big enough dose internally to be an issue. I mean, they found it was absurd. And we covered the stories on the Nagasaki Hiroshima anniversary, typically, with hundreds and hundreds of academic studies shown clearly radiation was a massive nightmare. There were people whose organs melted in the highly radioactive zones, which would have been enough to radiate everything. You know, the coastline, they still find radiation down there. If you go to Geiger County, you get huge numbers. They rebuilt Nagasaki, Hiroshima on nuclear bomb craters. I know I had one commenter when I first started saying that narrative, in a comment right away saying, well, no, it never touched the ground. Yeah, but it doesn't need to touch the ground to radiate everything, stupid. It was just the industry, right? Remember originally to be the goblins were here always. They wouldn't just let everybody have their say, right? And so the pro-nuclear, before the video even starts, the live stream would start, would have 700, 800, 900 comments. And it'd be all bananas and potato chips and walking in the sunshine. They were always attacking me. I used to ignore it. And they would say the most vile things about me in the comment section. And I would just always ignore it. And you know what? I finally came to the realization that, wait a second, I'm not a bad person. They don't have a right to say that stuff about me and influence the people that are here to find out what's up. They're taking advantage of me the same way they took advantage of that kid when he's flowers, right? Just predators. Yuno Yamato, NHK World Correspondent / serial killer. United Kingdom Atomic Energy Agency and Fukushima Institute to cooperate in development in robotics. In 80 years of the nuclear industry, they still haven't got a robot. What does that tell you? The two of these are goblins on top of that. They're both, we know both of them. They're just perpetual goblins. How's the censorship tonight, I wonder? Hi, everybody. You folks are the best, man. Okay. We haven't got too much further to go, all things considered. I better slow down a bit. UK Atomic Energy Authority. These are literally just nightmares. United Kingdom, you always hear me the same words out of me, right? These are sadistic monsters. The United Kingdom pro-nuclear community, they're vicious. Same as Australia, of course. Canadian, too, because Canadian is basically British. We have the Queens or the Kings now faces on our money. Imagine how fucking humiliating that is. Just clean my glasses for a second. I think I got it that time. How is it? How the hell do people keep their glasses clean? Like, I struggle all the time with it. I gotta break out the spray. I've been resisting that for years. It was only like a couple months ago I said, I don't use spray in my glasses. And here I am, using spray in my glasses. Just can't take it anymore. I found natural stuff, right? I'm hoping anyway. You can't really trust what you read for these guys. Oh, yuck. All right. We're almost here. So, United Kingdom, for instance, they got a meltdown at Sellafield. It used to be called Windscale. After the meltdown, they changed the name to Sellafield. And today, and they've been melted down since 1957, and even today there's 8 million liters each day hemorrhaging, flowing into the Atlantic Ocean, where all the coastal communities all over in Scotland included, the people in the communities are dying in mass pre-Fukushima of plutonium poisoning. Animals and cows and sheep in all the farms. All the shellfish are gone from the whole coastline. They covered that up. They went through a lot of trouble to cover that up. That's the only good thing about being in the studio. You get lots of lights. But it doesn't always come clean, does it? It made it worse. There we go. That'll get us through the rest of the show, I think. I won't. There we go. It should be like a machine where you can just pop your glasses in for a minute. 30 seconds and they come out looking shiny. We're in the Jetson age. I think we'd have that kind of technology. It probably is out there, but it's... Alrighty, let's keep going here. They ran out of homeless a long time ago anyway, right? March the 4th, United Kingdom Atomic Energy Authority, Fukushima Institute for Research, Education, and Innovation in Japan signed a memorandum of cooperation. These are... It's like they're trading hockey cards or something. These are worthless. Robotics and autonomous systems supporting nuclear decommissioning. The signing ceremony was not held at Reactor 3. So they talk about it as if something spilled off a truck or something, right? These are 19-story buildings. These are 150 feet by 150 feet wide. These had 4 decades of reactor cores, around 9 reactor cores in each building. This one in particular, the Medusa, they're all Medusas, but this is a little worse because it was a plutonium mixed oxide reactor. They never show you these pictures when they're coming out with their grandiose narratives, do they? The Colham campus, situated south of Oxford, and that's where Wade Allison used to teach, was Oxford. The nuclear crank. Man, he even wrote books. He's like Rod Adams in Overdrive. I know that's probably scary to most people. Purpose of the collaboration is to speed up the introduction of robotics and artificial intelligence to resolve issues common in nuclear decommission. So what the fuck would the United Kingdom know about decommissioning? They still got 8 million litres a day going into the Atlantic Ocean. It's like almost 70 years later. It's an idiot industry. And every direction you look, like that screams idiot. Well, it screams monster, doesn't it? It screams they hate humanity, they hate the species. They particularly hate water. They have absurd contempt for water. The purpose of the collaboration is to speed up the introduction of robotics and artificial intelligence to resolve issues common in nuclear decommissioning, nuclear fusion engineering. Well, first off, nuclear scientists don't go to Fukushima, period. They don't even go, like, there are some that, within 100 miles of it. Most of the academics, when they get within 100 miles, they'll turn around and go back. I only talk about stuff that we covered and we can prove, that we can substantiate with the documentation. And the kind of stuff that we do here is the most resource-intensive form of journalism, right? It's forensic investigative journalism. We also do field studies, extensive, massive field studies. We're doing 4 to 5 months a year on the ocean species research without coming home for 6 years. And funding it ourselves, right? Issues of China's import restrictions and Japanese seafood may see progress. That way we didn't have... And, years ago, I remember for the first year when we were really busy, I had a bunch of universities show up in my comment section. Actually, the universities' websites, YouTube channels showing up, and were warning the people in the comment section that I couldn't be trusted. And the reason I couldn't be trusted, they said, was because I wouldn't take funding from them. I wouldn't take equipment from them. I wouldn't use their academic journals. I wouldn't interview their experts. And so they got to the point where they were so crazy because I wouldn't do it. They were in my comment sections to the point where I just mock them, right? But, when I look back on it, that was some serious desperate stuff, wasn't it? They were complaining to the comment section, I wouldn't take their money. I wouldn't take their money because I didn't want to be affiliated with a degenerate university. They're all degenerate universities. And I've been at this land before Fukushima happened. I was well aware of how this industry... The monitoring was conducted under the framework for the International Atomic Energy Agency. The least trustworthy people on the entire planet is UN, or any subsidy of UN. A precondition for China's phased resumption of seafood imports from Japan. So if China is going to use International Atomic Energy Agency's a litany of facts as the arbiter of facts, China doesn't want the food there because they don't want to accidentally eat it themselves. And so they might say, yes, we're going to import food from the nuclear wasteland like many other countries have already done, but just not do it, right? Canada removed all restrictions after 93 days. Canada is one of the worst countries imaginable. It's just a shithole now because of the invaders. All military age. You see, even down here, it's unbelievable. Their carts are full of groceries, stacked right up as high as you can get. They literally got to keep poking stuff as they're leaving. They're dressed in the best clothing. They're driving the best cars. They're dressed to the king, massive jewelry, everything else. These people just come out of a third world country with nothing, and they're given everything here. And it's really sad how we just sat the entire population sat there and took it. But we're seeing that worldwide, symmetrical. Wherever a country had any stability has now been invaded. And the taxpayers of those countries, instead of taking care of their own citizens, are taking really good care of the invaders. The monitoring was conducted under the framework of the International Atomic Energy Agency, a precondition for China's phased resumption of seafood imports from Japan. China suspends imports right after the nuclear plant began discharging water into the ocean. In August 2023. No, China had full restrictions on all farms and seafood since 2011. Right? They're framing the narrative that way because that was the original cover story. Water used to cool the molten fuel at the Fukushima plant has been mixing with rain and groundwater. The accumulated water is being treated to remove most radioactive substances, but still contains tritium. Now, we covered that whole narrative earlier, where that's the furthest thing from the truth, what they're telling you right there. And if you watch the whole video, you know what I'm saying. If you just joined us recently in the show, you'll have to watch that after. But we show you the documentation to destroy that narrative. Levels to 1/7, and we hear that narrative perpetually since August the 24th, 2023. Believe nothing this industry tells you, zero. There's less oxygen in the world's lakes than there was 20 years ago. Well, you mean 14 years ago. That's supposed to be in my other section for the whales and birds and mammals and animals section. I'll have to make sure I dig that out and the rest of it. Because I got a whole bunch on, because I follow this stuff all the time. I follow whales and birds, oxygen levels, insects, random attacks, stuff like that. Because we're looking for trends. And we basically got another video, die-off video, might even do it Thursday. Like the problem is, one of my big problems, I shouldn't say it, I suppose, but is I don't have any support here in Canada per se, right? Like, I guess that's not the best way to frame it. We don't have any Canadians that are concerned about this subject, when we should have at least half the population very upset about what's happening. So Fukushima, one of the things we postulated post-Fukushima would happen was a lack of oxygen, and that would manifest in a number of, let's say, very visible ways, like road rage, air rage in particular. We would start to see that numbers go up significantly, and that's what we've seen, right? Post-Fukushima, we expect to see road rage go up significantly, and that's what we're seeing, because when you got radiation in your body, you're producing less oxygen, less red blood cells, and red blood cells carry oxygen nutrition, and so you become more irrational. You do things that are not normal for you, and that's why you see a lot of mental health, where they'll talk about mental health issues as if radiophobia, but there's real mental health issues from radiation. The first studies they're going to do after a huge release is autism and Down syndrome. These are severe mental health issues, right? But long term, if you're doing any studies on radiation adverse effects, you should be looking at Alzheimer's and dementia, not just autism and Down syndrome, and schizophrenia, because lack of oxygen will mimic all of that. We got a few doctors now have come out, because I'm paying attention, looking for it. Ginger. If you take a couple spoonfuls of ginger chopped up and put it in a pot with 4 or 5 cups of water and boils it, and then filters out the pieces, that water, let it cool down, is great ice water. But it's really good for dementia. It's really good for your cognitive abilities. And we also, this is not me now, this is other doctors, and there's also doctors saying it reverses dementia. And then selenium and vitamin E in large doses, and it's easy to figure out what a normal dose is, just double it or something basically. Is good for Alzheimer's, even reversing it, and certainly avoiding it, and certainly reversing it. They've seen incredible, through actual studies, right? Oxygen levels in 15,000 lakes. They say a continuous reduction in oxygen levels was found in 83% of the lakes they studied, and the oxygen levels are dropping faster than observation of rivers and oceans. Because the oceans and rivers are obviously oceans are much bigger, and rivers are much bigger. Lower oxygen levels can disrupt the lake ecosystem, harming species living in the lakes, impacting economies on the shore. Media release. Globally, dissolved oxygen levels in lakes are dropping due to climate change and heat waves. Modeling suggests. First off, climate change. Let me explain that to you. You got 80 years of radioactive emissions. So let's go back 80 years, and you've done nuclear testing. You had some nuclear meltdowns. This is Fukushima model. So think of this as a snowstorm coming out of Fukushima. You're at day 10. You're going to be at day 20. Now you got a snowstorm right here, day 20. This goes to 30 days cycle. So at the 20 days, you got the whole planet is covered in a snowstorm, but the snow never stops coming out, and the snow never goes away. But think of it as radiation. So now you have a snowstorm of radiation covering the entire planet from the upper troposphere to the bottom of the oceans. It never stops snowing. You got 1,000 fuel pools that are hemorrhaging radiation like this every day, worldwide. So you have this perpetual saturation of the entire planet. The stuff never goes away, so it's always accumulating. It's always bioaccumulating. And it slowly suffocates the planet, slowly sterilizes all the species in increments over decades. And then you have a pulse event like Fukushima on top of that, which just accelerates it all. But think about this particular type of snowstorm of radiation. Each atom, each snowflake per se, which is actual anthropogenic man-made atom that we're talking about, superimposed, pulses energy almost at the speed of light every second. Carbon doesn't have those attributes. So you can't say climate change / carbon, because carbon gives you more trees, more oxygen, more plants, more insects, more birds. Excuse me. Radiation exterminates everything. Alrighty. How did we do tonight? We got brutal censorship, did we? Brutal censorship again. Does the International Atomic Energy Agency and the nuclear industry hate Earth, humans, and all species? Hate Earth, human, and all species. I think that's the only way you can really look at it, isn't it? Because that's clearly what's going on. Oh, James put out an amazing song and video there today where you literally feel like you're there. Man, James has been here supporting us for so many years. It's unbelievable. And now he has transcended, where he's a musician and an artist and a filmmaker. And so the thing about, I was watching this morning. I didn't sleep too good last night. This morning I just had to check. And he had put out another video. But it made you feel like, because he does all the video himself, right? It makes you feel like you're actually in the nuclear wasteland zone. There's no birds, there's no insects. It's just these flowers, because you have the cherry blossom flowers going on down there right now. I'm just going to correct the audio for you. And get over there and give him a like. You only got 3 likes, for goodness sakes. I got the audio. I'm going to readjust it for you. I just want to make sure it was in high quality before I start our closing song tonight. And we got all kinds of headlines that there is no birds, there is no insects, there's no people. They want people to go back to these, because there's the cherry trees are blossoming. They look really pretty, but it's a nuclear wasteland. And if you take your loved ones there, you should be charged with attempted murder. I'm going to adjust the audio for you. We'll see everybody. Hopefully tomorrow night. Have a great night, everybody.
They said the cherry trees had fungus, said the branches couldn't hold, that the bloom came early, too early and too quiet. It wasn't spring, it was stress, it was fallout at the cellular level. Inside petals darkened before they opened. The bark flaked in strange direction. Every spring came faster. Every branch aged slower. The wind tried to shake the silence, but it clung to the blossoms like a warning. No one read. Accelerated senescence. Photos don't lie. You saw the deformity still caught in the sky. No witch's brew, no spore to chase, just isotopes in seasonal lakes. You cut the trees before the bloom, before the petals told the truth. You archived the memory, filed it next to denial. But the trees didn't beg for mercy, they just stood until those in paper suits took the sword. Accelerated senescence, in root, in breath, in branch. Not the fungus, the fallout, not the sickness, the silence. You didn't prune, you erased.